And we said this last time, the majority of Americans don't agree with how that situation unfolded on ICE's part.
The protests right now in Minnesota are peaceful, which also calls into question like why Trump wants to enact the Insurrection Act.
Very much indicating that he wants Greenland and that we're going to get it one way or the other.
Anyone who's so willing to go to war, go and do all these things like Lindsey Graham, I'm like, why? And also,
I'm like,
I
yeah,
guess
Lindsey Graham, if you want to go, go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Washed Up episode 37. I'm Colin. This is Abby. We're in Washington, D.C., reporting on the weekly news. You don't have to listen to the legacy media that your grandparents do. And this week, we are going to be kind of delivering some updates on Minnesota and our reporting last week about Renee Good.
we've been talking about Minnesota and all of the episode last week was about it, but a lot's come out since that initially happened, so we're here to give you the updates.
Yeah, and our episode from last week got some interesting reactions. We got a lot of comments on it, a lot of views, and not all of them were nice. I feel like we kind of, that video got boosted among a lot of Trump supporters, which is fine. We will take any views that you guys are willing to give us.
Anyone who comments or likes things, even dislikes, I think will put it in a positive light for the algorithm for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of ironic because even though not everyone was being super kind in the things that they had to say, just so you know, it does help us circulate our stuff, even if you don't like it. So do with that what you will.
And you could accuse us all you want of having some Trump derangement syndrome. I think that a lot of people in DC, especially, may have it. Like people will always like joke about it. But we are accusing you of having Trump trans, which is basically the opposite. Anything that that man says apparently goes, which, in a republic is not the ideal way to go about things.
I've said it before, like, I've got a touch of the TDS from time to time. I think it's hard when the man is literally your backdoor neighbor not to get upset by the things that he does occasionally.
Especially
It's
if
like
you're
it's very hard to separate yourself when you're actually on the ground a mile away from the White House, and so we do our best, but not all of us are immune. I think I have natural immunity at this point. I've kind of built up a tolerance to TDS.
uh maybe not me. Well, but anyways, we'll give you guys some updates. I think being in DC especially, there's been a lot of uproar about like things that are happening, like you said, because he's literally in our backyard.
Yeah, and I want to deliver some updates to our reporting last week just because there was new stuff that came out. And in particular, DHS has been saying that the officer who shot and killed Renee Good had internal bleeding and that he was taken to the hospital after the shooting occurred, but then released later that same day. And basically, spokespeople from DHS were saying like this confirms that he was in fact hit by Renee Good's car. I think I'm willing to grant them that based off of the video that he was in fact the car made contact with him and possibly pretty hard. But I still stand by what we said last week of I don't think that there was the intent on Good's part to kill him, and I don't think his life was in fact at risk, and that doesn't justify the shooting that he did.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that everything that we said last week was very valid, which doesn't take away from the fact that if he was injured, I don't think she should have been killed at all. And, like I think about law enforcement, or I mean, ICE is supposed to be, a branch of something of the sort. I think law enforcement and ICE are different in that way, but in their training, they are supposed to first de-escalate things. Like when you're shooting, like we mentioned this last week, they are taught to kill if they are shooting. Like if you're shooting, you're in danger. You're supposed to aim to kill and not just to injure. And there's just things that you should do beforehand, which I don't think that the officer did.
Right, and so obviously, like, neither Abby nor I condone in any way acts of violence or aggression toward against law enforcement of any kind, including ICE. And that being said, I do think there's still nuance to situations like this where I don't think it justified the action that then took place. Even if he was injured, we hope that he wasn't, but according to DHS, he had that internal bleeding. Although I have heard that called
Um,
into question.
I'm not the biggest fan of DHS at the moment
DHS
and
is
Christine Ohm.
they're kind of known to bend the truth on occasion. Like, for instance, they've been saying, hey, we're arresting the worst of the worst when it comes to the people they're arresting and deporting. And yet, at the same time, 84% of the people who they sent to that El Salvador prison had no criminal conviction. So it's like, if you're really arresting the worst of the worst, you would be targeting people who
Who
are committing violent crimes specifically, and only 5% of the people who they sent to El Salvador, from most of them being Venezuelans who were in the US illegally, actually had convictions for violent crimes.
hmm And it's really hard for me to trust Christine Ohm in general. Not the biggest fan of her, but we'll see what happens there. I don't know. People are very distrustful of her, I think. Like,
Yeah.
not just us, slash me.
Her and her henchperson, Trisha McLaughlin. So CBS was the one who broke that story about the fact that the officer had internal bleeding. And I also have some serious questions about CBS and their
Yeah. What
reporting.
do you think about what's been happening with CBS? Like, why are you saying that you're having some distrust in them?
Okay, so recently Barry Weiss was made editor-in-chief of CBS News CBS was bought by Larry Ellison, who kind of like installed her at the top of that organization. Previously, Barry Weiss had been in charge of the Free Press, but Barry Weiss has no real background in broadcast at all or television. She came from the New York Times as an opinion writer, not a news writer, then established the Free Press, where again she was a writer, but not even a very prolific one. And then now she's running CBS. I think it's absurd. I don't think she has the resume for it. And also, she's way too friendly with the Trump administration on a variety of issues. But recently, during a 60 Minutes interview with Trump, they exchanged kisses on the cheek. So I just think that tells you a lot about where Barry Weiss is in relation to the Trump administration. She also pulled some reporting that they were about to do on the El Salvador prison that I just
Mhm.
referred to, and they decided to hold off on reporting it for reasons unknown at the moment.
As journalists, I do think that it's really hard to trust people when they're so, buddy buddy with the people in power. Like in general, the ideal setup for journalists are that they are the watchdogs of what's happening, like reporting and informing the general public. So I totally see where you're coming from there.
Yeah, I mean, just some distance between reporters and politicians would be nice.
I
Again,
think that's the only way that it's able to work in a reliable way that people can trust. And, trust is at the foundation of everything when it comes to information, especially nowadays with all the dis and misinformation going around. So that's why we try to do the best we can with our research as well.
yeah, I mean, like from our standpoint, we'll tell you what they're reporting about his internal bleeding, and we do think that that sheds a little bit of light on what might have been going on there, but at the same time, with a massive grain of salt of where is that information coming from? Is it a reliable source or not? And we would say there's definitely still questions. This isn't like an open shut. Now we know exactly what happened.
hmm
Um,
And we talked a lot about the situation last week, but there's been new information that has come out, or maybe it was like the day that we published the episode that we didn't talk about it. I think you put it in the description, but
yeah.
some of our hate comments maybe don't read
Yeah,
the
so
description.
also just continuing on with our updates on the Renee Good situation, I do think it's fair to say that the officer was telling her to get out of the car, and obviously she did not get out of the car. And so people who are more pro-ICE, or maybe even the ones with the Trump trance a little bit, are saying if she had just gotten out of the car, then she wouldn't have gotten shot. And I think that is a fair point to make. I'm willing to see that, but I also am still pretty adamant about the actions that she took, the situation didn't warrant her getting gunned down.
Yeah, her partner was telling her to drive, and that might have also been a point of in antagonizing, like setting fire to the situation. But again, like I don't think that was another reason for her to die. Like I can't even make it clear enough. Like she shouldn't have died in this situation at all. And people that are angry about it, I can so empathize and see why they're angry about it.
And again, we said this last time, the majority of Americans don't agree with how that situation unfolded on ICE's part and how
Hmm.
ICE has been conducting itself in all of these arrests and raids and whatnot. And so even though, again, people in the comments can comment all they want, I think the majority of Americans are not in agreement with ICE on this. And
Yeah, I totally see that. And we're seeing a lot of, distaste for ICE on the ground here in DC as well. Like, it's crazy how fast people are being recruited for ICE.
I know they've been scaling up their recruitment a lot. I mean, the other day I saw a truck with like a digital advertisement that was basically like recruiting people to join ICE because ever since they got this massive funding boost from the one big beautiful bill, they've they've ramped up their recruitment and now
Hmm.
went from 10,000 agents to I think 22,000. So it's like a huge surge of hiring.
Yeah, and it was even reported that currently in Minnesota, like they deployed around what, like 3,000
Mhm.
ICE officers there. Seeing all the numbers in that and seeing what's been happening there has also been, I think, crazy, but also seeing their community go against it has been kind of heartening. Like, I think it's really, really a wonderful thing when your community comes together, but off of something that shouldn't even be the case. Like, I know I would be really upset if there was 3,000 ICE officers in our backyard right now.
Although to be fair, how many National Guard are currently deployed in
True.
DC?
Which I'm still upset about. I
Yeah. No, I get that point.
don't think people should die over it, but
And totally, but I think like the recruitment that's been going on for ICE raises some questions about the training that all of those new agents are able to receive. And if you're onboarding so many people at the same time, presumably they're also hiring people to train them and um, I'm not necessarily calling into question the training that they are receiving, but I do think it would be hard to vet everyone who you're bringing on to join ICE and to make sure that everyone was up to standard. Although that being said, specifically the agent who shot Good had been an ICE agent for over 10 years at this point. So again, I'm not calling into question his training or his experience, but in general, if you're bringing on so many new people, I would imagine it would be really hard to maintain your standards.
And with that 10 years of experience, that also makes me think like, shouldn't you have tried to do something different maybe in that scenario that wouldn't have resulted in somebody being killed? Like you were in front of the car. Like I'm not saying that you were asking to be hit, but there's some things to call into question with that, I think.
Yeah, actually, so people know on this show, I really like Megyn Kelly. I listen to her show a lot. I think it's very informative. Her analysis is very good. She's a former slash current lawyer, and I think like that background of hers is very impressive, and I take her points oftentimes I think she's accurate, but she was talking about this idea of assumption of risk, which is like a legal defense in a personal injury case where the plaintiff is uh, knowingly or voluntarily accepting the dangers of an activity, so that prevents them from then suing if they are in fact injured. So Megyn Kelly was saying, shouldn't Renee Good have had that assumption of risk if she's going to be out there kind of antagonizing or harassing ICE agents? And the question, I mean, I take that point, but I also think wasn't the agent assuming a certain level of risk by going in front of the car? And, perhaps we don't know exactly what their training is, but I have a hard time believing
That
that that
their
would,
training tells them to, if there's a moving vehicle, like step aside or step in front of it and try to stop them at all costs. Like I highly doubt that.
yeah. So, I mean, this idea of assumption of risk, I think I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, but I feel like it could apply both ways, where, yeah, you shouldn't be harassing or interfering or stepping in front of an active ICE situation or just antagonizing officers in general, I don't think is wise. But I also think um, I would have a hard time like imagining that they're instructed to like walk in circles around the car in a situation like that.
Yeah, and in general, like when it comes to, protests and people being upset, like people have the right to protest. When it becomes violent or when you're trying to respond with physical physical violence, that's where it becomes different, but fighting words are still just words.
And the Washington Post was reporting on Friday, literally yesterday, that this is coming from Ju District Judge Catherine Menendez, who was just saying she barred DHS agents from arresting peaceful protesters unless they're suspected of criminal activity. So that means like people who are just witnessing what ICE is doing in their operations and how they're conducting themselves, people who are filming ICE or even following them around, that is
Like it's
not
completely
grounds.
allowed.
That's within people's right to protest, to assemble, and to speak. And so this judge was essentially just barring federal agents from retaliating against peaceful protesters, and that includes like using pepper spray, non-lethal munitions, or even just stopping or detaining protesters again for peaceful acts of protest.
hmm And from what I've been seeing on the reporting and in the news, like I've seen people saying that most of the protests right now, or the protests right now in Minnesota, are peaceful, which also calls into question like why Trump wants to enact the Insurrection Act, which last time it was enacted was, the LA riots, the 1992 LA riots, which actually we kind of not have a connection to, but our old journalism advisor at the USD Vista was a reporter on that, and that was like one of her number one stories that she would tell us. She would tell us about how they were driving around the streets like when it was really crazy and there was like a lot going on, and how she basically like risked her life along with like I think like what two or three other people in the truck and was like getting footage of it, and how she even said like at one point that they were like the only ones who had footage of like some certain things that were happening.
Our advisor, she was in LA for Rodney King when the police had beat him really badly,
hmm
and then there was riots, and they had to invoke the Insurrection Act. This was George H.W. Bush. And the Insurrection Act is something that Trump has been talking about invoking for Minneapolis in the wake of, what's happening right now. And it has been invoked 30 times in the past by a handful of presidents over the course of US history. Usually it's been invoked on behalf of the governors requesting that the president invoke it as a way of using the military to carry out law enforcement, essentially. Because we have a long-standing tradition in the US against using military to enforce the
No
law,
one likes it.
against civilians particularly. I mean, for very obvious reasons. The US was founded because people were really pissed off about the military being active and enforcing the English rules against the colonists. And
hmm
so, again, it's in our tradition not to use the military in that capacity, but there are occasions, riots, etc., where usually, again, the governor will request the president send the military to enforce the law. In this case, the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, is very much not requesting to
Oh,
invoke
definitely
the
not.
Insurrection Act.
And I don't think anyone in Minnesota really wants the Insurrection Act to be invoked at all. I mean, I've been seeing things from, the Attorney General of Minnesota, Keith Ellison, talking about how the protests have been peaceful and anything that, like, I think that by invoking that, that would only cause like more riot and more violence. Like, I could imagine if that were to happen and people being arrested for, like peacefully protesting or just like again antagonizing people, which they're allowed to do, um, even if, it might be not be the smartest decision in what's been happening right now. If that happens, like I could just so imagine it only escalating things, which I don't think at all is the right decision to make.
We talked about last episode, like when there's that risk of escalation and further violence, someone has to be the adult and step in and say, actually, we're going to take the temperature down, both in terms of rhetoric and actual, activity happening on the ground. So, I mean, they very much could pull back on the surge of ice that they've had in Minneapolis, and that might help to tamp things down a little bit. Or perhaps even the governor of Minnesota could be a little bit clearer in his messaging toward the people of Minnesota, basically saying like, this is a trap. They want you to be out there. They want you to be angry, but make sure that everything is peaceful. Keep it within your protected rights and don't be violent against law enforcement because that's not going to help the situation.
What do you think about Tim Walz recently?
I think Tim Walz is just a massive disappointment in general. I think his tenure as governor has been atrocious. His time as Kamala's VP pick was laughable. He did have a statement last week saying he encouraged people to film ICE as they're carrying out their activities to, quote, create a record of atrocities against Minnesotans. Which I mean, I guess, like, sure, that the word atrocities is a little bit incendiary if you ask me. But I get what he's going for. He's saying, like, use this to hold people accountable. But I also don't think that he's been doing enough to, like I just said, turn the temperature down. Um, Although he is under massive pressure because the DOJ is opening investigations into Walls and now the mayor, Jacob Fry, about whether or not they've been impeding ICE from doing its job.
hmm I think, like you said, I think there could be a different way of going about, approaching your state and the people in it to um, better protect them, honestly. Like, I think in any case of rising escalation, like there should be some type of peacemaker to honestly for the safety of everyone and people, even if they're angry, especially when they're angry, actually. I think that when he was talking about, recording things and keeping a record, like I think that part's completely valid. Like I think there could only be if you're peacefully protesting, antagonizing ICE officers, angry about things, if you're videotaping it and keeping that record that you're not doing anything wrong or illegal or enacting violence in that way, that is a good measure, in my opinion, of keeping yourself safe while also fighting for what you might believe in.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And I think it is a very tall task to expect of anyone in a authority position to be able to, again, turn the temperature down, keep things under control. It's not an easy thing. My only concern just being like, I don't think Tim Walz has ever been the man for that job. And so I'm sticking with that position as things are unfolding in Minnesota. Even if I don't think he's handled it like horribly, but I've never thought that he's the man for this particular job.
I think there needs to be somebody stronger in their, like you said, messaging. Like I think that's really important when you're addressing so many people, especially people who are so angry about what's happening in their homes.
Yeah, so I mean, I was glad that the judge had issued that ban on federal agents from conduct certain conduct against peaceful protesters because I think that was at least a step in the right direction where there's actually like a legal guardrail being implemented. Um, and maybe the governor isn't really the one who's in a position to be doing that kind of stuff, but I was glad that a district judge was. That being said, with the DOJ now opening these investigations against Walls, a bunch of federal prosecutors are resigning, kind of in protest, it seems, about, yeah, just the way that the investigations are being handled, and also the fact that no charges have so far been brought against the agent who shot Good. That might be part of it as well for why those prosecutors are deciding to step away.
hmm I see that. I don't, do you think that that's the right decision for them to step away in this scenario if they want there to be action? Like,
I don't know. I think it's still pretty early into any potential investigations that are going to happen. And so I mean, I would personally think it would make sense to maybe stay on. And if not that they would have any like political influence because that's not really the role of a prosecutor, but if
yeah.
you believe that you are able to do that job and other people around you are not effectively doing it, then it would make sense to me you would want to stay on.
Yeah, I see that too. I also see like if you're from your experience, like I'm assuming that these people are experienced, educated people who hopefully know how to do their jobs. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think in resigning, it does send a message.
So we've talked about how the protests thus far have mostly been peaceful, but there was another incident of violence in Minneapolis Wednesday night, actually, where there was a man from Venezuela who was fleeing from federal agents. after they were stopping him for a traffic stop. He was here illegally, it seems, and so they were chasing him after he got out of his car. They tackled him, and two other people came out with shovels and broom and attacked the agents, and then the man who they were chasing got up and also started attacking these agents. So they shot the man from Venezuela in the leg. And, this again was another kind of incident that was being widely reported as evidence of violence happening in Minneapolis. And I do think, again, in the interest of turning things down, we would again strongly say don't interfere with law enforcement trying to conduct operations. There's other ways of perhaps sending a message about your displeasure of the fact that they're there, but directly attacking law enforcement is in my view, a dumb way to try to turn the temperature down or express frustration. I think that there's more productive ways to do that, and if you are doing that, then you are taking your life into your own hands, where in this instance, they shot the man in the leg, but it could have been very different. He might have been killed, and imagine how much worse things would be in terms of escalation if a second person had been killed shortly after Renee Good. I think it would have unleashed even more kind of pandemonium and in a
Like,
very unproductive,
mhm.
unhelpful way.
And I completely understand the anger that people are feeling of, so many ICE agents and, officers in their backyard, essentially. Like, I mean, we're in DC, like, we see the National Guard all the time. And I, like you were saying, don't see an acts of violence against law enforcement as a way that could be at all progressive in a way that would send that right message. Like in my mind, I'm thinking about it and people like Trump or people in the Trump trans, like they're already looking at people being like, no matter what you do, you are violent people or you are like trying to cause chaos amidst people who are quote like just trying to do their job. So to me, I'm like, why are you trying to prove them right, I guess?
Right. I mean, even we got accused from after our last episode of being responsible for the downfall of civilization. So
Wait, what comment was that? Like, why am I
You'll
like
have to
not
go back.
remembering
You
that?
have to go back and look. Or
Okay.
if you didn't see it, even better. But yeah, I mean, like, there's people on both sides who view the other side as completely evil, and therefore it's justified to do whatever you want in retaliation against the other side. And I just think that that is so premature and so short-sighted because any act of aggression or violence that you're going to carry out on the quote unquote other side, you should anticipate and expect that the other side would be equally willing to do that to you. And so when when there are acts of violence or even just um, like disputed incidents like the Renee Good shooting, I think that escalating the situation by then engaging in more violence is again just super unproductive and it invites further escalation that could be handled in better ways.
Hmm.
Again, through like the legal channels that exist in this country.
Like the judge
Mhm.
who is protecting people's rights to peacefully protest. Like I think, like you were saying, like I think that it was an 100% great thing that happened.
Yeah, I mean, so like we are very much in favor of the rule of law, and part of the rule of law, the reason the legal system exists is to kind of stop that escalation from happening because we provide people with the outlet that they need to get justice that is not going to be inherently violent. And so I would just say like have faith in the system even though it is flawed. There's flaws at every level of the justice system and I think that's just part of the fact that it's a human institution. All institutions are made up of people. People are flawed, so institutions are flawed. But have a little bit of faith that the system that we've designed and set up and the tradition that carries it forward is actually effective and it exists to prevent the kind of violence that I think we're all afraid of and don't really want to see happen.
Having faith in the system is a really hard thing to do nowadays, but it is actually an essential foundation to democracy, like keeping a republic. Like if you don't believe in the system, then there's this outright, like, I guess, like unruliness that you're allowed to engage in, um, if the system is like, quote, done or like ruined. And I think it's really good to be skeptical of the system. Like, I don't think you should be blindly following anyone, which is, I think, where the Trump trans comes from. Like, there's no one who I think, like, people are flawed, Trump flawed, but I think that, like you were saying, making sure that you're staying protected in a sense of not putting yourself in the danger by enacting violence when that retaliation is just going to be violence back.
Hmm. And I think young people especially have a hard time having faith in systems, especially our
Yeah,
generation,
Gen
Gen
Z
Z.
is really bad with that, I
Like we've
think.
seen some stuff,
Rightfully so, I think Gen Z is bad at having faith in the system.
and we were coming to adulthood through COVID, through George Floyd and BLM, and that was like very formative years for us. And so I think it makes sense for a lot of Gen Z to be very skeptical that the system that is in place is actually going to act on behalf of or in the best interest of citizens. But the more that you read, and like the older that I get, the more that I learn about our system of justice, why it was designed the way it was, our system of government too. I have greater confidence and faith in it, even as I also am having more and more questions. But you realize that the questions that we're being confronted with as a society right now are not brand new. They're a variation, perhaps, of things that have happened in the past, and they require our renewed attention and even action at times. But it's not like everything has never happened before. We have a long lineage in this country of upheaval and even at times like war, but we come through it on the other side, and I think the system gets stronger with time.
And also changes with time
Hmm.
when it's called for. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think it is a great, wonderful thing when everyone can come together and decide and fight for what they believe in a way that actually makes some great change in their communities.
Yeah, so there is hope, even if it seems like a very dark time at the moment.
And it does feel like a very dark time at this moment.
Just kind of wrapping up from me at least, on Minnesota. There's now Trump is going to be ending funding for sanctuary cities starting at actually the beginning of February, and so that was potentially going to impact federal grants, including transportation, housing, nutrition, and community policing, which I thought was a little ironic. Um, Basically, the cities who are not reporting undocumented people or turning them over to ICE, um, they've been having that policy of called sanctuary city, where undocumented people can kind of live without having to be concerned that they might get deported or turned over to ICE. And yeah, so the funding for cities who have those policies or are not cooperating with the federal government is now going to get revoked. And I think that that could definitely have consequences for this ongoing discussion we're having.
I could so imagine only people being more angry and, more government involvement, which I'm also not a fan of.
And the reason I say it's ironic is because if they're withdrawing funding for community policing, couldn't that lead to more unrest in the streets? Like having the federal agents there enforcing the immigration law, they're allowed to do that in their capacity, but it also helps to have local law enforcement working in cooperation with the federal and just maintaining like general order and civility and peace. So I think revoking that funding could lead to, again, more escalation. And I think the fact that Trump is doing this in the name of kind of punishing sanctuary cities or getting his way in terms of allowing ICE to continue their operations in these various different cities, I don't think it's very effective
I
because
don't think it's
he's
a very smart decision of him at all.
to turn local law enforcement against federal. I wanted to say, so Rand Paul was on Joe Rogan's podcast last week, and he made the point that I thought was a very good point, though, that the sanctuary cities are not helping the situation by, again, not cooperating with ICE and the federal government. I think the sanctuary cities not cooperating with Trump has given Trump more license to crack down on them. And he probably would be doing that regardless, just knowing Trump and how he is and how he likes to be in control of everything. But up until now, the way that the sanctuary cities have been uncooperative you could argue, or Rand Paul was arguing, um, might have given Trump more license to crack down.
I don't know. I see it like the point that you made. I think Trump would have been doing it either way to these sanctuary cities. So if it's I mean, I don't think again like when I'm talking about like violence or anything like that, like I don't think that is essential, nor do I condone it, but I do think that there's something to look at when cities are fighting for um their people.
Mm. And speaking of things that Trump wants to do, regardless of support from the public,
Oh God.
um, he is now very much indicating that he wants Greenland and that we're going to get it one way or the other. And I just wanted to ask what you think about that.
Well, I am not a fan of that. I don't think anyone's a fan of that. Maybe the people who, are diehard Trump supporters, but like the people in charge of Denmark and Greenland aren't a fan of that. A lot of NATO allies aren't a fan of that. A lot of Americans aren't a fan of that. He's just doing what he wants nowadays. I mean, like, not that he ever didn't, but I just don't think it's a good idea at all. Um,
Yeah, I saw a stat that fewer than 4% of Americans are in favor of taking Greenland by military force, which is that you would be hard to find an issue on which a large percentage of Americans are in agreement than that.
mhm.
Literally 4% want that, and only 8% of Republicans want that. So
That's crazy. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, no one wants you to do this. Even the people who voted for you.
it's just crazy because again, everything we just talked about in this episode, we have so much bigger fish to fry at the moment, so much going on domestically that I think it would be asinine to try something like a military invasion takeover of Greenland. They've tried like diplomatic solutions, like they had people from, I think like a delegation from Denmark come to Washington D.C. this week to discuss like certain conditions under which they would negotiate, and didn't really lead anywhere. Greenland's prime minister is like, yeah, no, we choose Denmark. Sorry.
Yeah. And I think I mean I'm on that page. Like I don't think there's any need for us to get more involved in that than we need to be. Like there's literally no reason. I mean like you just said the stats and I think that Trump would do well if he listened to people that isn't himself.
I mean, so now he's like levying tariffs against European countries who he sees as like opposing his plan to get control of Greenland. And,
Yeah,
we've
what was it like
seen
10% tariffs or something like that?
that tactic too. It's kind of just his way of throwing a temper tantrum. Very predictable, very expected at this point. Feels like a bit of a high school drama though to me, where it's like Greenland, like who are they gonna choose? Like US or Denmark?
They already like are like, yeah, we'll stick with Denmark. So it feels like a very
Hostile takeover if he does in fact like angle to get
And
Greenland.
I think that would only anger so many more people. Like I'm thinking about like NATO, like like a bunch of them signed an agreement being like, I think that they should have their sovereignty. Like there's no reason why the US should get in there, like whatever. I mean, I don't know. It like you said, like high school drama, like I do think to myself, like, is Trump just doing this for the drama of it all? Like, is
Yes.
he like I'm thinking about it and I'm like, there's no need for force there. Like I don't understand like his true motives when it comes to that. And like he could say all he wants about like, national security or like whatever, whatever, but I just don't see that that is the driving reason or a good enough reason to upset so many countries, people, Americans.
Right. And he's proposed this like forceful solution, but one diplomatic solution that I've seen floated is that Baron Trump could marry the Princess of Denmark, and in that way we could just resolve all of our differences and come together over that, which obviously is ridiculous, but I figure
Funny, funny jokes.
if we're like going the direction of an empire, we might as well just lean in.
Oh my God.
And again, this happened like we just took over Venezuela like 2 weeks ago, if
Hmm.
that. So it feels a little bit early to be now trying to
Like
potentially
being for
take
this
over a second
is
country.
imperialism.
I mean, apparently it's crazy. But Venezuela, speaking of, Maria Corina Machado came to DC as well this past week,
Gave Trump a
and
little prize.
the White House posted a picture of her with Donald Trump in the Oval Office giving him her Peace Prize. So what do you think about that?
I think it is not at all like legitimate. I don't know. I'm like, if I went over there and they handed it to me and I posted a photo with it, does that mean I'm now a Nobel Peace Prize like holder? That's what it gives. It gives very representative or it gives very performative is what I mean by that. And I don't know. What did you think? Like it's just so silly to me. I'm like, there's no way that people actually are looking at this and they're like, ah, yes. Trump,
I thought
you
it
are
was
the Peace
hilarious.
Prize winner.
I thought Machado might even be trolling Trump in a way by giving him the prize because she's showing that she's very much above like the need for that external validation. She's like, here, I don't even care. Like, I care about Venezuela. I care about the people. I care about peace actually as a concept, not just as a prize. And and to me, like the picture that the White House posted of them together, it looked like Trump was like holding up something he had made in school. Like, look what I made. I like, isn't it so wonderful? And Machado seems like the adult in that situation, being like, yeah,
I
good,
gave the mouse the
great,
cookie.
good work, kid. So I thought it was a bit absurd, and also the community note on that Instagram post was making me laugh because it was saying like, yeah, the winner of the Peace Prize can choose to display it wherever they want, but that doesn't mean it's actually been transferred from one person to the other.
That's exactly what I was saying. Like, he's not actually a Peace Prize winner. That would be
Yeah.
so silly and ridiculous.
Like the historical record is not going to say that he won the Peace Prize in 2025. It
No,
just That's not what happened. So
it's gonna say Machado decided to display it here.
exactly. And although Trump did do something a little bit peaceful last week by deciding not to attack Iran. So what do you think about that?
I mean, I would say a little bit peaceful in a sense that the decision didn't even have to be there. Do you know what I'm saying? Like he's deciding against his own decision. Like
Yeah.
it's so silly. It's giving like when we were talking about all the wars that he stopped, except he's the one who was inciting it.
Yeah, I guess deciding not to start a new war, although that is peaceful by historical standards.
He's fighting against himself, so that is what I'm thinking there. That was like my first thought process. I'm like, is that an accomplishment? Maybe in terms of Trump.
I mean, it was getting kind of serious though. We were texting that we were a little bit concerned about where things were going with Iran because they've been having these mass protests in the street, and allegedly the government there has been cracking down on the protesters, which is interesting. But they've apparently been arresting a bunch of people and even killing potentially hundreds, if not thousands, which is crazy. It's hard to verify those numbers.
Yeah, I was trying to do research on like how many people have died, and according to the Human Rights activist news agency, they were doing like a research study and they said around 600 Iranians have been killed so far.
I mean, that is egregious. And also, at the same time, I don't think we can go around as the US necessarily like intervening in every single global situation and definitely not striking them with bombs. I don't know how that's going to necessarily help restore order on the ground within a country. And it seemed like that was what we were preparing to do, perhaps. Maybe not bombs, but sending troops over because they were clearing the airspace over Iran. And according to the Washington Post, we were pulling back our troops from bases in the Middle East, sort
Which
of.
also is scary to think because, like, why are you pulling back troops if not for some big thing to get ready to be happening? You know what I'm saying? Which I think is what we were texting about a little bit, or maybe I was talking to a different friend about it.
Yeah, and obviously we went to a 12-day war with Iran in June of last year, so Trump is not opposed to striking his perceived enemies and carrying out, campaigns like that. And we saw that happening again in Venezuela like 2 weeks ago when he raided and arrested Maduro. So it's not out of the question that he might actually have intended to launch something, but luckily they decided not to. And or at least I think that's lucky because I don't want to see the US getting more involved overseas in further situations when we have so much going on at home and so much going on with already Venezuela and now Greenland.
I highly doubt many Americans want Trump to keep intervening in other foreign politics.
Except for Lindsey Graham. He's the one and only person, it seems, who is just really salivating to go to war, especially with Iran. And he was with Trump on like Air Force One, kind of like egging him on and being like, "Yes, we're gonna go to war. We're gonna go to war." Finally, like he's gonna get his wish. And then he seemed so despondent after we decided not to. It was actually making me laugh.
Anyone who's so willing to go to war, go and do all these things like Lindsey Graham, I'm like, why? And also,
I'm like,
I
yeah,
guess
Lindsey Graham, if you want to go, go.
do it yourself.
I mean, he's like 70 plus, I think, years old, so he's not going to be the
Maybe he's
one.
just bored. He's like, let's make let's make some chaos go happening.
Yeah, anyway, so that's all that I got for this week. Crazy, crazy week. A lot of unfortunate and terrible stuff happening, but at the same time, I think our last couple of stories have reminded me that there are things to laugh about in all these different situations. Maybe not Minneapolis so much, but like with Greenland, it's just kind of inherently a bit comical.
The Peace Prize, also comical,
Lindsey Graham, comical.
always comical.
We'll be here again next week, regardless of what comments we get on this video. We are going to continue delivering the news as factually as we possibly can, trying to be as comprehensive as we can, giving as much credence to all the different sides and perspectives. And yeah, even though we've updated our opinions about a couple of things and updated our reporting today, I still believe we are fundamentally on the right track.
I agree with that. I'm really excited to see the way that Washed Up continues to grow.
All right,
Washed Up
washed up out.
out.